Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome to a great Tuesday edition. Having a full show today. I know I didn't have a show yesterday due to meetings and stuff, so but we still have some clips up. And hopefully, guys, the sound sounds a lot better than it has in the past week or so. I have switched back to Old Faithful. I've got something that's actually going to make it sound better coming within the next couple of days. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay. So there's that. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. I know I had one. Again, I hope you have too. But it's good to be back. Got a lot of great stories for you guys today. We're going to talk about Kirsten Gillibrand and Trump. We've got one Roy Moore story on the eve of his election. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I do think that he will still end up winning. We also have the internet, the founder, the creators of the internet, and I'm not talking about Al Gore, are coming after Ajit Pai, and it's awesome. We've got the Trump tax bill. Another report on it, and how much it'll destroy the deficit. We also have the DNC, very important story out of Wired about how the DNC is screwing over progressive candidates, progressive Democrats in races where they're running against incumbents. So that's a very, very important story. Then we've also got a story about how Republicans are leaving the Republican Party and basically turning it into the party of Trump. So, interesting. All stuff that we kind of already know, but a lot of information in this. All right. So, one more thing, too. I've been having problems with Patreon. Some of the patrons are not having access to any of the videos that I put up. So, I normally put up the entire live stream for the patrons. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to, from this point going forward, at least until I fix that problem or whatever, I'm just going to put up the video for everybody. I don't like paywalls. I don't like keeping or restricting access to content for anybody. But I wanted to do something special for the patrons for supporting the show. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do on that yet. But for now, I'm going to put up these posts. The video will, the stream will go up on Patreon, and just everybody will be able to view it. So it'll be a public post. So, all right. I'm actually happy to do that because, I want everybody to have access to the live streams. So, all right. That said, let's move on. Let's go into the first story. Of course, we're going to talk about Kirsten Gillibrand first. Then we'll do Roy Moore, and then we will talk about net neutrality because that is incredibly important, and the vote is very, very soon. So that's what we're going to do. All right. Starting off, boom. Oh, boy. President Trump cannot help himself on Twitter. He recently got in trouble earlier today for tweeting something about Kirsten Gillibrand. I'm going to have the tweet for you in a little bit and tell you what he said. But look, Kirsten Gillibrand has been an incredibly vocal opponent of President Trump and has recently called on him to resign over some of the sexual harassment and assault allegations that have plagued Trump throughout the years. So now some of those alleged victims of President Trump have come out recently. Again, after calling him out, are now also supporting his resignation due to those allegations. And of course, the president, he's not very happy about it. He responded on Twitter with a post that a lot of people are finding way, way, way too far. Let me read this. Lightweight Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, total flunky for Charles E. Schumer. Why didn't they just say Chuck Schumer? I don't quite get that. And someone who would come to my office begging for campaign contributions not so long ago and would do anything for them is now in the ring fighting against Trump. Very disloyal to Bill and crooked. Used. I don't quite understand what that means. But look, again, Kirsten Gillibrand has been leading the charge against President Trump and saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to call for him to resign. She's one of 5 senators that have publicly called on him to resign. It includes Ron Wyden. Bernie Sanders is also one of them. So now, again, this comes from previous sexual harassment and assault allegations. These women are speaking out because Trump has had a history of demeaning women, harassing them, insulting them. You guys remember all the stuff during the campaign, just from the campaign, about women. Oh, there's Megyn Kelly. She's got the blood coming out of wherever. And then, oh, the Miss Universe. She's a fatty. And you know, she's definitely not a 10. She's like a 5. Like, who does that? Like, who does that? I know. You're gonna say this locker room talk. Well, okay. Well, your locker room is full of very shitty people. Let's just say that. And you can't just do locker room talk or whatever in public. That's the thing. You want to say it's locker room talk. Okay, whatever. I don't believe you, but whatever. But no, you're taking it far beyond the locker room. You're actually saying these things in public about these terrible, demeaning things about women in public. When you do that, you're a bad person. Simple as that. Now, look, the Access Hollywood tape lends a lot of credence to these women's allegations because it's stuff that he's already bragged about. I mean, for example, he's like, I can't help it. I see a beautiful woman, and I just start kissing them. That's why I need the Tic Tacs. And then, you know, I could do anything. I'm a star. They let me do it. I can grab them, you know, I can grab their pussy. That's stuff that he's all said. And stuff that we have heard before. So, look, it's not in question that President Trump is definitely misogynistic. He's got misogynistic sexist tendencies, right? He wasn't kidding when he said he grabbed him by the pussy. That's exactly what he's alleged to have done. You know, groping women and forcibly kissing women. Again, that's what these allegations are from, right? And so now that we've seen the end of Al Franken's career, his political career at least, John Conyers, Republican Trent Franks also resigned. Now there's a lot of people out there calling for President Trump to resign, and Gillibrand is, again, one of the people that are most vocal about this. Now, of course, I know, Trump's not going to resign. Not over this, right? No. The only way Trump will resign is if Mueller finds something incredibly damning that's definitely going to get him jail time, and he says, oh, did I? No, I didn't do that. Alzheimer's. I have Alzheimer's. I'm going to step down. That is the only condition that he will step down. And we're not sure if that's going to happen at all. We're going to have to see on that. However, that is what Republicans do. Again, I mentioned Trent Franks. He did something incredibly bad. He was the guy that was like, hey, you want to be he's telling coworkers this, right? You want to be a surrogate from a baby? What? What are you talking about? Like, you're asking your coworkers, essentially, can I have sex with you and impregnate you and have you carry my kid? At least that's what it seems. And the fact that he resigned after this, this whole thing went down and was discovered, it shows that it was pretty bad. Republicans, they do not resign unless it gets really, really, really bad. We'll have to see if Trump gets to that point. Again, I don't think he's going to resign. And look, it's because Trump is a deeply immoral person. I think there's no doubt in my mind that he did it, that he did all these things to women that he has openly bragged about. Again, there's no doubt in my mind, right? And, Trump, along with Roy Moore, again, very deeply immoral, right? Now, what's got a lot of people worked up is what he said about those donations, right? And that's what really drew me to doing this story. Because, again, he tweets all sorts of stupid shit all the time on his Twitter. All you have to do is check his timeline, and he's insulting somebody, right? It's the way that he insulted Kirsten Gillibrand that I think was very, very interesting. He tweeted that she would come to my office begging for campaign contributions and would do anything for them. Did she? You know the connotation there, right? Oh, she came to my office and she was begging me for those donations, give me that money, and she'd do anything for them. Oh, how are you supposed to take that? I know there's some people like, oh, come on, there's nothing inherently sexual about that. Okay, hey, that's your point of view, man. I completely disagree, especially when you look at the kinds of sexist statements that he's put out before about women. So, again, it was definitely meant that way. Gillibrand responds with a direct tweet back. You cannot silence me or the millions of women who have gotten off the sidelines to speak out about the unfitness and shame you have brought to the Oval Office. And afterwards, she, of course, got a lot of support. Interestingly enough, from Gretchen Carlson. Now, she's a former Fox News host. She helped take down Roger Ailes. So, same thing, sexual harassment. Roger Ailes was proven to be a pervert of just an enormous degree. There were stories where he would take off his pants and chase women around the office with his balls hanging out. I mean, this was a disgusting dude. Gretchen Carlson helped take this guy down, and now she's, of course, sticking up for Kirsten Gillibrand. She wrote, "What do you mean Senator Gillibrand would do anything for campaign contributions? By the way, she isn't a lightweight. This is coming from a Republican, a conservative. So, like I said, Gretchen Carlson ain't nobody's liberal, ain't nobody's feminist, but she's sticking up for Gillibrand because I think it's obvious for a lot of women that this indeed, like, they've heard this kind of shit before. And, I'm a dude, which should be fairly obvious. I don't hear that kind of stuff. Nobody says that kind of stuff to me. There's a bit of a double standard here that I don't hear this kind of talk, but a lot of women do. And they hear these connotations, these obviously sexual connotations. And look, a lot of guys don't pick up on it, but I think it's pretty clear here. And it's very easy to pick it up when you know President Trump's history of being sexist and of saying things like this. Now, Katty K, I'm sorry, I want to give you the second tweet here from Gretchen Carlson. She said, quote, "Sexual harassment is apolitical. Women will not be silenced no matter what party they're in, period." Katty K, an anchor for BBC World News America, she also said, "What is so maddening about the Gillibrand tweet is that women can be smart, work hard, become senator, and still get sexual crap thrown at us. Enough." Now, look, even if you're in the mind that this tweet was not sexually suggestive, which, again, I know there's a few of you out there, okay. Well, he claims that she would come to his office and beg him for donations. Well, how much? According to Open Secrets, since 1996, Trump, before he was president, had donated $8,900 to both Chuck Schumer, the person he named in his tweet, and $5,850 to Kirsten Gillibrand. So, oh my God. So he gave money to Kirsten Gillibrand because she must have begged him, right? Look, it costs nearly $1 million to run for a Senate seat. That's the average, right? He's given $5,850 to Gillibrand since 1996. What little he's given to Kirsten Gillibrand is actually kind of sad and pathetic. Look, I'm in favor of getting all money out of politics, right? Because I do believe that these large donors definitely have more of a voice in our politics than regular people. But when you look at the amount of money that he gave this politician in, 20 years, it's barely anything. It's a blip. And yet he's like, oh, she's falling all over herself for those donations, begging me for that $5,850. No. I can guarantee that she was not. Look, this man's a child. We have a childless president. We know this. And this guy has such an inflated view of himself. Now, there's another part, and I'm sure I'm, going to see this in the comments as well. Some of you are incredibly cynical. And I think some of you might believe that this is a stunt because Gillibrand is just running for 2020. Well, first, it's not really a stunt because, again, Trump did tweet this out. Oh, but if you mean stunt by, like, her calling President Trump out and saying that he should resign, well, she is, again, one of 5 different senators who has actually called him out. And look, she's been working on sexual assault in the military for a long time. You want to call that a stunt? I don't really believe it. And look, the male members, right, who were also calling for Trump's resignation, they don't hear this kind of stuff. They don't face this kind of same criticism. You ever notice that? So, for example, Bernie Sanders, very likely 2020 contender, right? And he's somebody that I absolutely want to vote for. I hope he does run. I think it would crush Trump. I think it would completely clear the field. I'm not looking at him saying that Trump should resign as just a ploy to, run in 2020. But Kirsten Gillibrand, fair or unfairly, is getting that criticism, and I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. I just think that what she's doing is that she is actually trying to do the right thing. Because look, sexism is alive and well, and in this case, it's definitely a driving factor of President Trump's criticism. He's not treating the males who are calling for his resignation the same way that he's treating women calling for his resignation, and I think that speaks volumes about who President Trump really is. Okay. All right. Before I go to the next story here, I do have someone to thank for using the super chat, Nicholas Miller. So thank you, Nick, for the super chat. Definitely appreciate it and appreciate your help. So you guys are awesome. Okay. Moving on to the next story here. And now we've been talking about the sexual assault and molestation charge or accusations when it comes to Senator or candidate Roy Moore. Now, Moore, he was a terrible person with terrible views even before we found out about the molestation, right? The fact that he's a child molester that preys on people from the ages of 14 to 17 years old. Now, again, he's got other terrible views, and I want to talk about those, right? Now, recently I talked about a rally where he had brought up the issue of slavery. Now, his comments, when you're taken in context, are basically like, well, look, back in the days when when America was great, is when we had strong families, right? And we also just happened to have slavery. So, okay, well, full stop on that one. The families weren't exactly strong if you broke them apart. Sure, maybe families were strong for some, right? Some people's families were stronger back in that time, but African Americans, they did not have strong families because they were routinely ripped apart as children were bought and sold from their parents, and families literally ripped apart. He ignored that when he talked about slavery, but he thinks that that time in American history somehow was the time when America was great or better than it was today, which is disgusting. Now, another piece in context that puts that, or I should say that puts that comment in context is the fact that he wasn't even asked about slavery. He just brought it up on his own. Well, that's weird. Why would you bring that up? Yeah, even though we had slavery at that time, America was fantastic. Okay. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, there's another sound recording that's been dug up by CNN's K-File. Now, this is a 2011 radio interview with something called the Aroostook Watchman. Now, the Aroostook Watchman is a far-right radio program. Never heard of it. Now, the host of this is one of those sovereign citizens. So basically, this guy's like, well, hey, U.S. law doesn't apply to me. So I can go and do whatever I want because I don't believe the law should apply to me at all. That's weird. And it's also weird that you're talking to somebody who was a judge and now who is wanting to be a senator, right? So this is somebody who's supposed to be law and order, talking to somebody who doesn't believe the law should apply to him. Wonderful. I wonder if they understand irony at all. It doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it. So what did they talk about? Well, they talked about, among other things, Constitution and what amendments that they would just absolutely love to shred. Let's take a listen.
Personally, I would like to see an amendment that says all the amendments after 10.
Yes. That would eliminate many problems. You know, people don't understand how some of these amendments have completely tried to wreck the form of government that our forefathers intended. Specifically, I think it's the 17th Amendment election of senators.
That's right. The 17th Amendment needs to be repealed.
All right, so for those of you who don't know or might not know what the 17th Amendment stands for and what they actually want to get rid of, well, the 17th Amendment basically made it so that you could directly elect your senators. So that actually is more democratic. And that's small d democratic, by the way, allowing you to elect your own senator from your own state. And now this guy, the Aroostook Watchman, and Mr. Moore, they're like, no, we need to get rid of the 17th Amendment because fuck democracy. We don't really care about your ability to vote. See, the way that it worked before is that your senator, before the 17th Amendment, was just appointed by somebody. Now, it could be appointed by people with wealthy interests, right, that are bought. Now, don't get me wrong, our senators today are also bought, but at least we have some sort of voice, and at least we can actually fix that problem. What he's saying is, no, let's let's eliminate the constitutional amendment that allows this voting of senators. We're gonna fix this problem of corruption with less democracy. Where I'm in favor of fixing it with more democracy and actually getting the money out of politics so that the senators actually represent the people. Again, Roy Moore does not agree. Now, it's funny. Again, the Aroostook Watchman is one of the right-wingers, of course, that are just, again, like, we don't care about democracy. It's very, very clear, right? And ironically, here comes Roy Moore, again, running for the Senate. The same thing, of course, that he would love to change because he would love to be appointed to the Senate. Oops. So there's the 17th Amendment. Wait till you get a load of what he thinks about the 14th. He said, and here's actually a clip on that.
People don't understand, and from being from the South, I bet you get it, the 14th Amendment was only approved at the point of a gun.
Yeah, it had very serious problems with its approval by the states.
I believe that the 14th Amendment is what they strangle us with. I believe the 14th Amendment makes us not state citizens, not sovereign individuals, but owned by the federal corporation. I believe that is the way the 14th Amendment has turned out.
Well, the danger in the 14th Amendment, which was to restrict, has been a restriction on the states using the first 10 amendments, by and through the 14th Amendment, to restrict the states from doing something that the federal government was restricted from doing, and allowing the federal government to do something which the first 10 amendments prevented them from doing. If you understand the incorporation doctrine used by the courts and what it meant, you'd understand what I'm talking about.
Okay. No, what I understand from that is that, again, he's saying that, oh, the 14th Amendment gives too many rights. Why do we have to have a 14th Amendment? Well, look, the 14th Amendment basically guarantees and enshrines due process, right? It also grants equal protection to everybody under the law, especially for freed slaves, because that's primarily what it did. It gave people, African Americans who were former slaves, citizenship. And here's more saying, oh, the 14th Amendment, so many problems. I wonder if one of those problems has to do with black people being considered citizens. That's not all. He said, get rid of the 11th through the 27th, gone. That includes the 13th Amendment, which effectively abolished slavery. The 14th, as I mentioned, the 17th, as I mentioned, the 15th Amendment, which granted African Americans the right to vote, and the 19th Amendment, which also granted women the right to vote. He wants all of that completely gone. That's who Roy Moore is. When you guys go to the polls in Alabama tonight to cast your vote, remember who this is. And if you agree with him, and if you agree that, hey, man, look, I don't think black people or women should be able to vote. I don't think they should be protected equally under the law. And I don't want democracy. You know what? I don't want to have to vote for Roy Moore. I just want him being appointed by the oligarchs. That's who I want. That's what I want. Well, then, if you vote for that, don't be surprised at what you get. Round the nation. Everybody, welcome back. Round the Nation right here, TYT Nation. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. I want to do a couple of super chats again. Thank you again, Nicholas Miller. You are awesome. And I also have another one from Karen Sheets. And she asks me a question. She says, do you believe that Moore will tear the Republicans apart if they have to deal with him? No, I do not believe that. I think what they're going to do, the Republicans in Congress, they're going to seat him, and then they'll give some lip service about, oh my God, it's so terrible to work with Roy Moore. But the good people of Alabama have made their choice, and so we must live with it. And please let us join together with Roy Moore to pass gigantic tax cuts for the rich. That's what's going to happen. At least that's my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. But thank you for the donations. Nicholas and Karen, you're awesome. I have the best audience in the world. All right, let's move on. We have net neutrality. Oh, I don't know if I just mentioned, but please give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Thank you. Okay, moving on. The pioneers of the internet, including the inventor and the so-called father of the internet, have a new message for Ajit Pai of the FCC. Quit fucking around with our internet and do not repeal net neutrality. It's a pretty strong message. Now, in an open letter published on Monday, that's been posted by the Huffington Post, More than 20 industry leaders and pioneers sent a letter to the FCC over its plan to repeal net neutrality rules. Now, they, of course, require internet services providers to treat all content on the internet equally. It's kind of important for, and I should say really, really important for small businesses, especially for media outlets such as myself. So I would be massively affected by net neutrality, as I think every channel out there would be. And this is a way for large companies, large media companies, telecommunications, ISPs, to be able to gain an unprecedented level of control over the internet. That's why I am against repealing Title II protections. Now, it's funny. This letter goes into how the FCC has made its decision, and points out that, of course, that it's basically all their information on how the internet actually works is actually wrong. They said it is important to understand that the FCC's proposed order is based on a flawed and factually inaccurate understanding of internet technology. So that brings me back to the old joke, and I forgot who said it. The internet is just a series of tubes. The inner tubes. It is actually not a series of tubes, but apparently Pi and the rest of the FCC commissioners that are appointed by Republicans, they believe it. Again, you ask like super old people, and look, to be fair, Ajit Pai is not an old person, but he is an industry Verizon shill, so of course he's going to be like, oh no, yeah, series of tubes. We're going to make the internet slower, and then we're going to call it competition. Doesn't make any sense, and it's not based on anything factual or anything we actually know about the internet and how it works. Now, they said the letter said that these flaws and inaccuracies were documented in detail in a 43-page long joint comment signed by over 200 of the most prominent internet pioneers and engineers and submitted to the FCC on July 7, 2017. Despite this comment, the FCC did not correct its misunderstandings. Well, you think they're going to correct those misunderstandings? No, absolutely not. They ignore all the comments in favor of keeping net neutrality rules. They also ignored all the fake comments that were, surprise, surprise, opposed to net neutrality rules. So like, oh, fake comments coming from one place in Russia? No, not interested. We're not going to talk about that at all. We're not going to engage with these. We're not even going to admit that these comments and the comment period was problematic. We're just going to go full steam ahead with getting rid of net neutrality, despite all normal internet using humans saying, don't touch our internet. Don't fuck with Title II protections. Do not give the internet over to the ISPs. They don't care. Now, the comment referred to a letter in detailed numerous the comment referred to in the letter detailed numerous technical mistakes in the FCC's proposed order, including a flawed understanding of the differences between ISPs and edge providers, which is content companies like Netflix, and how firewalls functioned, or described in the document as, quote, a stunning lack of technical knowledge. Now, look, you would think that the regulators in charge of regulating an industry would at least have some sort of cursory understanding of how the industry works, how the industry functions. I mean, they have enough people in the revolving door that they should have some sort of understanding of how the internet actually fucking works, but they don't. They don't have any sort of minimum knowledge of what they're talking about. There's more. The engineers and experts who penned the comment warned that repealing net neutrality could have dangerous consequences, including stifling future innovation and depressing future investment in the wealth of internet services that drive such a large part of the U.S. economy. Now, here you have the so-called father of the internet, a man named Vince Cerf, not Al Gore. I know there's some people out there, Al Gore, he claims he invented the internet. No, he has claimed no such thing. It's actually Vince Cerf, who is also Google's vice president. To be fair, we are one of Google's partners because we're on YouTube. Anyway, there's a slight conflict of interest in there, perhaps, or so it would seem. But Cerf said Well, Cerf was one of the 20 luminaries who wrote a letter to lawmakers urging them to push the FCC to cancel its vote on net neutrality. This sentiment was also echoed in Monday's letter, whose signatories included Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, Mozilla Foundation executive chairwoman Mitchell Baker, and Internet Archive founder Brewster Kahle. The letter detailed how the FCC has not just ignored experts' warnings, but also the millions of public comments that have been submitted on the issue. The FCC also has not held a single open public meeting to hear from citizens and experts about the proposed order, a break from what they call established practice. And there is a reason for that. Ajit Pai and Trump FCC regulators, look, there's a reason they don't know about the internet, because it's not their job. That's not what they were appointed there to do. And we see a pattern with a lot of different Trump nominees. See, they don't give a damn about how the internet works. All they care about is who's paying them. Give me my paycheck. That's all. That's all I want. Give me my paycheck. Give me my future job when I'm done working in government. And Pai has just guaranteed himself a pretty cushy job after he's done at his stint at the FCC. Now, the repeal of net neutrality is nothing more than a gift to his friends in the industry. He doesn't need a fundamental understanding of the internet and how it works in order to destroy it. In the words of Upton Sinclair, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding. And again, this isn't the case just with Pai, but with all the different departments where Trump has had the ability to appoint someone to run. Tillerson, for example, was appointed to the State Department to basically help ExxonMobil. That's what he was put there to do. You also had Scott Pruitt, that was appointed to the EPA in order to dismantle it, to dismantle regulations, and to make it easier for fossil fuel companies to go and basically do whatever the hell they want in order to make a buck. Betsy DeVos was appointed the Secretary of Education in order to basically dismantle public schools and push charter schools, which will help the private corporations. This is not an accident. This is by design. So I don't think Pai or the FCC are going to care at all what these founders of the internet think of his plan, since, again, he doesn't already care about what the vast majority of the users of the internet actually think. However, the letter's authors did urge lawmakers in the Senate Commerce Subcommittee on Communications, Technology, Innovation, and the Internet, and the House Energy Subcommittee on Communications to push for Pai to cancel the FCC's vote scheduled for Thursday. So we don't know if that kind of pressure will actually work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But they said, quote, the FCC's rushed and technically incorrect proposed order to abolish net neutrality protections without any replacement is an imminent threat to the internet we worked so hard to create. It should be stopped. So here's a rare story in which we actually have corporations on our side, which is fucking weird, right? So we've got big multinational corporations like Google, Netflix, Facebook, all on our side. And don't forget Mozilla also. And we also have people who are charged with actually creating the internet in the first place, saying, hey, don't mess with our creation. And here's Ajit Pai saying, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to destroy your creation. I'm here to water it down. I'm here to hand it over to the giant corporations that give me a paycheck. That's all he's there for. Okay. Moving on. Again, I wanted to give another shout out to Nicholas. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it with the super chat and the helping out with the donations. You are awesome. All right. Let's move on. We've got tax cuts for the rich. And then we'll get to our big DNC story. All right. Now, Republicans in the Senate and the House are working to basically resolve their differences with the different tax bills that they have passed. Now, this tax bill, of course, will massively cut taxes for corporations and the wealthy. That's the entire purpose of the bill. That's what they've been trying to do since day one in order to please their donors. Now, they want to get it done before the end of the year so they can give that massive gift of tax cuts to their donors right in time for Christmas. So it's a Christmas gift for them, and for the rest of America, we get a lump of coal. Wonderful. So that's the plan on that. Now, different experts, right, have been doing an analysis on both the Senate and the House version, and they've basically been coming up with similar results. That no matter what version you pass, it's going to blow a gigantic hole in the deficit. Now, again, I thought Republicans were all about deficit reduction during the 8 years of Obama. Oh, we got to do something about the deficit. The deficit's out of control. We got to do something. We got to do, we got to cut these regulations. We got to lower, well, they did talk about lowering taxes, but we got to cut these government programs, all this waste and fraud and abuse. We got to do something about the deficit, right? We care so much about the deficit. Well, now, when they're going to pass this gigantic tax cut, the biggest tax cut in history, where are the Republicans about the deficit? I mean, there's a few that are worried that we're against this bill. It's like, oh, no, the deficit is too much. I'm not really going to support it. But I think most of the Republicans have come on board anyway. And look, what this bill does, what they're ignoring is the fact that no matter how you slice it, this is a budget-busting bill. In fact, the House bill specifically would add over $1 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. The Hill explains the tax bill House Republicans passed last month would not produce enough revenue from economic growth to pay for itself. Again, that was one of the claims that was adopted for a while, and then they were like, yeah, it's not going to pay for itself. We're actually going to have to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. That's what Paul Ryan came out with last week. He's like, yeah, so we're going to tackle the debt now, even though we just passed a gigantic tax cut for the rich. That's going to increase the debt. Wonderful. So, all right. Now, this is according to a 12-page report from the Joint Committee on Taxation. So that's Congress, right? So that's the congressional arm that actually goes through and analyzes tax bills and sees what kind of impact it's going to have on not only the budget, but economic growth. And they said that, look, the economic growth that you guys are saying is going to happen is not going to happen. It's not true. It's a pony. It's a fairy tale. It's a unicorn. It's not going to happen. And we've got $1 trillion worth of debt over the next 10 years that we're going to have to deal with. Now, what's the Republican reaction to that? You're wrong. Fake news. Oh, okay. So look, their entire thing is, dynamic scoring. If we give all the tax cuts to the rich, well, that's going to create economic growth. It's going to create jobs, and everybody's going to be happy. They're going to have their own, everybody's going to have their own mansion and everything like that. If we just give more and more to the rich. Now, is that going to happen? No, of course not. Now, first of all, okay, I want to go back to the Republican reaction here for a second, because here's a good example of the argument that they're using against this Joint Committee on Taxation report. Kevin Brady said that this analysis reflects the fact that JCT, quote, historically is a very conservative estimator of growth. You mean they actually use facts? That's weird. JCT previously estimated that the Senate bill approved by the Finance Committee would also add $1 trillion to the deficit after accounting for economic growth. So they are actually saying that, well, there will be some sort of stimulative effect inside of these tax cuts. But even with that, you're giving all of this money to the rich. There is going to be a gigantic boost to the deficit, okay, which means more debt in the long term. Now, Republicans, as I said, argued against that by saying, well, you're you know what, your estimate is of growth is super, super low. Again, it's because they deal with facts and not fairy dust and unicorns, which is what this bill essentially promises. Oh, don't worry, it's going to trickle down. Well, we've had something trickling down, and it hasn't been wealth. I mean, look at what we've done in the past 30, 40 years, right? Since Ronald Reagan, we've cut taxes, we've crippled unions, we've cut government programs, and what have we gotten for that? More jobs? Not really, especially not good jobs. In fact, you have wages that are stagnant, benefits at work that are near non-existent, unless, of course, you are lucky enough to work in finance, which is basically making money off of money. Well, look, when you have to start making money out of money instead of actual things, like actual material goods, and you're making money off speculation, you know something is broke in your economy. And that's what's going on here. And speaking of broke, the middle class and the working poor and the working class are broke. We're all broke because all that money has flowed to the top. And that's the big problem here, okay? And speaking of jobs, of course, look, they're not going to create jobs, okay? Now, they claim that, look, if we just lowered the corporate tax rate to 20%, that's what this bill does, then we can actually be competitive in the rest of the world, because corporations aren't competitive because they pay the highest corporate tax rate in the world. They're supposed to pay 35%. What they don't actually tell you is that companies often pay around 20% already, and sometimes less. The effective rate, and they never talk about the effective rate, it always happens to be lower because of loopholes and exceptions that are carved out. So we're about at 20%, even less for corporations. So they say that there's going to be this big stimulative effect if we lower the corporate tax rate to 20%. But since they're already there in their effective rate, where are the jobs? Well, there are no jobs. They're not going to be creating jobs. A lot of these companies who will benefit from this plan are going to do basically two things. They're going to pay off debts, and they're going to do stock buybacks. This is according to the company CEOs themselves. Now, doing stock buybacks increases the price of their shares by, of course, taking some of those shares off the market. And that, of course, is connected to executive bonuses, which is going to, of course, obviously pad the pockets of the CEOs and some of the shareholders. So, no, this tax bill doesn't create jobs, and it will not pay for itself. And then, of course, if they lower the rate to 20%, and this is a claim that always happens, right? So we're going to lower corporate taxes, but don't worry, we're going to close loopholes, right, and deductions, so that we pay a fair tax rate, right? It's funny, every time they do that, there seems to be more carve-outs, loopholes, and deductions that get added in. That's what they're going to do this time. Again, they already pay around 20%. Some corporations pay 12 to 14%. We lower the corporate tax rate to 20%. There's going to be new loopholes where some corporations are going to pay 5%. Might even pay nothing, depending on the loophole that's created. So, again, they're going to find some way to cheat us, to cheat the government. And the reason I say cheats us is because whatever the corporations don't pay, we end up paying. Higher payroll taxes, for example, because the government doesn't collect enough money from corporations anymore. So we have to so they have to raise taxes on the rest of us. It's gross. Now, again, lowering the corporate tax rate, it's not going to create jobs, it's not going to pay for itself, but it will give a gigantic boom to the rich. And that's the entire point of this bill and its many different provisions. That's why the American people, when they look at this and they see what's in the bill, they don't like it at all. They do not like what they're seeing. It has a 35% approval rating. They can see that this bill is crafted by and for the wealthiest Americans, and they're not interested in that because they know that it's going to be the biggest robbery from the American people and the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class and the working class to the rich in American history. Okay. All right. Let's go with the DNC story. Again, another shout out to Nicholas, who is donating quite a bit of money today. So thank you. I appreciate it. Now, there's a lot of amazing progressives that are running in the Democratic Party so that they can actually represent the voters instead of the large multinational corporations. These are progressives that have been, in a lot of ways, inspired by Bernie Sanders and said, you know what, I'm going to run a campaign where I don't take money from super PACs or from corporations. I'm going to run in my state. I'm going to take on these Republicans and, in a lot of cases, incumbent corporate Democrats. So I'm going to take over or I'm going to take on these incumbents so that I can actually represent the people in my district. Now, Bernie Sanders has shown that you can run a great campaign without taking money from these super PACs or these large donors. But you can't really run a good campaign if you don't know what voters you have to target with your campaign, where you should spend your energy, where you should spend your focus, and what voters might be most receptive to your campaign. Now, that information is inside of a database known as Vote Builder. Now, Vote Builder happens to be managed by the DNC. Do you see where I'm going with this? Now, look, if you've never heard of this Vote Builder, then look, I'm not surprised. Not a lot of people know how political campaigns actually operate and how vital this list actually is to people who are running for office or who aspire to run for office. Okay, now this voter database is actually a way for, or is now being used, ironically, as a way for local and state parties affiliated with the DNC. It's being used as a way to crush these progressive campaigns. Now, Wired explains why this Vote Builder is so important and how they can actually use it as a weapon. Now, they said that Vote Builders become a central nervous system for every Democratic campaign, housing years of information on just about every contact the party has ever made with every voter. Developed through the partnership between the DNC and a company called NGP Van, the tool gives campaigns the inside track on potential donors, volunteers, or voters out of a pool of thousands, or in the case of a presidential election, millions of people. So it's absolutely vital that if you're a candidate that you have access to this list, right? However, as you're going to see, the DNC is making access to this list for people who are not part of the establishment, for people who are actually actively challenging establishment Democrats. They're making it very, very difficult for these people to be able to access this list. Now, there's a few people, for example, Justice Democrat Anthony Clark, that have ran into problems. Now, here's how they do it, right? Now, thanks to an intricate system of state-by-state rules governing who gets access to the data, some primary challengers, like Clark, are now being denied access to this critical pool of information by their own party. Again, this is supposed to be the Democratic Party, supposed to be an open tent. Oh, hey, look, may the best person win with the best ideas. Well, now it's turned into, oh, you're going to run against an incumbent? You're going to run against our guy, part of the establishment? No, then you're not going to have access to this voter data. Good luck, sir. That's what's going on here. Now, this, of course, is by design. By denying access to this list, you're going to protect incumbents. You're going to protect people who are major players in the party. So, and they're major players in the party infrastructure, and I think a lot of them might be prolific fundraisers for the party, and I think that gives it an extra perverse incentive to cut off people who are actually challenging these incumbent Democrats. Now, Clark, who is running against Representative Danny Davis, who's held the seat for about 20 years, says, quote, "The machine protects incumbents. What's one more way you can stack the deck against me? Deny me access to valuable information and data." In Illinois, some of those state rules prevents any candidate running against an incumbent from gaining access to the vote builder file. So that's one of the rules in Illinois that they put to stop progressive challengers. Oh, you want to run against an incumbent Democrat? Okay, well, find your own file. Sad day for you. Now, rather than allow access to vote builder, the state party instead directed Clark to a tool called Smart Van. Now, this is another NGP van product that lacks proprietary DNC voter data. Again, this is somebody who's running as a Democrat. This is not somebody who's running as a third-party independent challenger, who obviously shouldn't have access to DNC data because they're not running as a Democrat. But this guy is running as a Democrat, and they're basically choosing the establishment Democrat, the incumbent, over everyone else. They're rigging the primary in favor of the establishment candidate. That's what's going on here. So, just like they stacked the primary against Bernie Sanders, rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders. Again, we're not talking about changing vote totals, but we are talking about voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression. So, and also not treating each candidate equally when it comes to their races, not being a neutral party, which again is what this falls under. They are not being a neutral party to these campaigns within the party. So, again, they won't give him access to vote builder, Anthony Clark, but instead will allow him to use a less effective means of campaigning. So again, it's very clear evidence that the Democrats are trying to crush progressives. It gets worse. That's just in Illinois. Remember, state-by-state rules, right? In Washington, there are rules that are even more ridiculous. Sarah Smith, a Justice Democrat running a campaign against incumbent Democrat Adam Smith, was told that access to vote builder required the endorsement of 50% of legislative district clubs plus one, as well as the backing of the state party chair. So basically, you have to win the primary before you can even run the primary. State legislators often wait until close to the actual primary to make an endorsement, Smith says, meaning her campaign would have to spend the majority of the race waiting around for endorsements before gaining access to the data. And even then, the likelihood of sitting party officials endorsing a challenger over an incumbent is low. Again, she's got to win before she even starts trying to win. Never have we seen this sort of systemic corruption, and this, of course, is inside the Democratic Party. That's why it has to change. Now, even more infuriating for Sarah Smith is this, quote, when she asked to see where the bylaw was written down, she was refused. Oh, sorry, we can't let you access our voter data because you haven't been endorsed by over 50% of all district clubs and the party chair. Okay, well, hey, look, can you at least show me where that's written down in your bylaws? Sorry, you can't because you haven't been endorsed by 50% of the... You see where I'm going this, right? You see where I'm going here. It is incredibly corrupt and not fair at all. So, okay. So she was denied the voter data. And look, so was Smith, right? Or so was Clark. But Clark went and got the other voter data, right? It's less comprehensive, but at least it's something, right? Smith tried to go that route as well. However, she also got denied, thanks to the bylaws. Sarah Smith's campaign spokesperson asked the party for a letter stating that they were being denied access to vote builder. At least then, of course, the thinking went that she could at least access Smart Van, so she could do something, so she could get the ball rolling. In response, the Smith campaign says they received a, quote, Kafka-esque email claiming that even though campaigns can't access Vote Builder without the endorsements, quote, In our eyes, a campaign that doesn't have endorsements hasn't been denied. Again, so they're saying, hey man, look, we denied you, but we didn't actually deny you. So you're just going to have to wait to the end of the campaign when they actually do their endorsements before you can actually campaign, meaning you have to win the campaign or you have to win the race before you can even start trying to run the race with our voter data. Wow. It's amazing the dirty tricks that these incumbents will use to keep their power, right? But there's more. Now, Smith's campaign is now using a tool called political data. Now, that is not cheap. It costs about $10,000, substantially more than both Vote Builder or SmartVan. Now, you can imagine for somebody who's an incumbent who can raise millions of dollars or gets money from the DNC, $10,000 is not a problem. But remember, these are small grassroots campaigns that aren't taking any corporate or PAC money. So to raise $10,000 out in Washington, that's actually hard to do. But that's what she had to do in order to get this data to even try to have a shot at running. And again, it's not as complete as the DNC's Vote Builder data. Now, Smith says the fact that alternatives exist does not make up for the party withholding information from newcomers into the party. So this is I wanted to say it's an old boys club, and it kind of actually is, but it's basically a secret club that we're going to make sure we're going to keep everybody else out. If you want to challenge us, we don't abide challenges. We're going to find some way to screw you over so that you can't actually be competitive at all. Now, that's not the worst, right? Or maybe it is. But there's another example of these rules and bylaws also hurting a Justice Democrat. In New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, another Justice Democrat, actually had no problem accessing Vote Builder. Oh, wow. But wait, there's a little bit of a catch. Rather than the wealth of information where voters stand on issues and who they've supported in the past, her campaign found only a stripped-down voter file. She says, quote, it was all gone. They had paid a total of $6,000 for basically nothing more than names, phone numbers, and addresses. No comprehensive voter data, which is what this is supposed to be. Now, that's despite a provision in the campaign's contract with the New York Democrats, which guaranteed Ocasio-Cortez access to, quote, all proprietary ID data collected or developed by other licensees in prior election cycles. Now, when they asked about this provision, the Vote Builder coordinator at the New York Democratic Party said that it only applies to data Ocasio-Cortez may have collected herself in previous election cycle if, for instance, she had run for a different office in the past. So you see how that provision, again, helps incumbent Democrats. Well, who she's running against, Joe Crowley, who was a darling, who's a darling of Wall Street, he's ran there for 20 years. He's a long-term incumbent, and so he has been able to gather and amass this huge amount of data, which is incredibly helpful for a campaign. Now, they're saying that that is strictly his data, and so you're unable to share it, right? Now, Ocasio-Cortez doesn't want his data, but she also thinks that it's not incredibly fair, right? Because what she's doing is she's being charged the same amount as any other candidate to access this voter data, but she's actually getting much less for it than her opponent, Crowley. So that, again, shows how this system favors incumbent Democrats. Now, this is how the Democratic Party, unfortunately, seems to deal with primaries. They don't like primaries. They despise primaries because they want to stay into power. And so, look, Republicans also want to stay in power, but they actually welcome primaries. But Democrats, they come up with rules and bylaws and dirty tricks in order to try to prevent any challenger from having a chance in any sort of primary election. This is how the Democrats right now operate. This is what we need to change if we're actually going to have a party that is more open and more inclusive of everyone's voice and actually represents the people. This right here is the systemic corruption that we need to change. All right. Let me take a quick break. I got one more story for you guys today before I get going for the afternoon. So stay right here. I'll be right back. Back and around the nation, right here, TYT Nation. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. We've got one more story for you guys today, so we will get to that. But again, thanks to everybody who's been supporting us on Patreon, as well as using the Super Chat. Again, you guys are awesome. All right, and thank you so much for supporting independent progressive media. Let's move on. Again, last story of the day. Republicans. What's going to happen? The Republican Party seems to have a little bit of a problem. Maybe a Trump problem, but definitely a problem of people running away from the party. Now, for much of 2017, it's no surprise that President Trump's approval ratings have been dismal. His poll numbers have been incredibly bad. He has the highest unfavorability ratings of any president elected into office. Again, this is all stuff that we know, right? However, if you're a Republican, chances are you love Trump. 82% of those in his own party, according to a Gallup poll, approve of the president. And you might think, wait a minute, what the hell is going on? How could he have such a high approval rating among Republicans? Then you realize the obvious answer to that is that Republicans have been shrinking. The Republican Party itself is actually turning into the party of Trump, the cult of Trump, as some people might call it. More and more Republicans actually seem to be leaving the party, leaving the Republicans basically only with people who support President Trump. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Philip Bump from the Washington Post actually goes into. Now, Democrats and independents actually despise Donald Trump for very, very high margins. And that means basically what you see is a majority of Americans. Again, independents are a massive majority in this country. And you see most of them not in favor of what the GOP has become. And we've heard a lot of stories of different Republicans leaving the party. You just had some, recent resignations over Roy Moore. Now, Roy Moore is, of course, somebody who had just gotten a full-throated endorsement of President Trump. Now, we didn't exactly know the impact and how much that actually affected how many Republicans there are until actually now. Apparently, there are now fewer Republicans or people who are openly admitting to being a Republican than there were previously. Now, last week, Gallup reported that the gap in partisan identity between both Republicans and Democrats was about 7 points, narrower than during the summer, but still wider than it was at this point last year. And the reason is that you've got a lot of people that have given up, that have left the party. Gallup's Jeffrey Jones wrote, a year ago, 44% of Americans identified as Democrats or lean Democratic, the same percentage as now. However, Republican identification and is leaning 5 points lower than it was a year ago. So Republicans, they're like, oh, I'm actually not a Republican anymore. So Americans are saying that, like, yeah, I'm going to give up on the party because I think they suck. What they've turned into doesn't represent me anymore. Now, again, what is the primary driver? Well, as far as who's leaving the party, well, they looked at that and they found out that it was women mostly leaving the party. Women actually are now about 5 points less likely to identify as Republicans relative to last November. White women are 7 points less likely to. So they're losing women, and especially white women. Now, look, that is not all surprising to me, considering the GOP has been anti-women for a long time. But not for a long time has it been this brazen. I mean, you've always had people on the fringe right? The super fringe right, I should say, that are like, oh, women should go back into the kitchen, right? And you've always had, in the mainstream, people who are like, oh, women should not have body autonomy. But in this case, they took somebody who was so vile to women and made him president. And, of course, and have thrown their support behind somebody who is basically went after and molested teen girls. So that shows you where the Republican Party is in 2017. Now, excuse me. Now, look, I'd always wondered why women would vote for the Republicans in the first place. Turns out, I think one issue, is the main issue for a lot of Republican voters. That's abortion. And so I think that's why they still kept a lot of people. But at the same time, I think some of this other stuff is now starting to, in some circles, overshadow that one thing. Maybe. Now, we have Republicans leaving the party, particularly women. And of course, you wouldn't be surprised to know that it's primarily the election of Donald Trump. According to the Washington Post, Gallup found slips in Trump's approval across the board since his inauguration. But polling for mayors conducted last December and November of this year seems... Sorry. I am just coughing all the time. Polling for mayors conducted last December and November of this year seems to reinforce the idea that some Republicans are soured on Trump specifically. As to whether they view Trump favorably, a different metric than approval, Trump's numbers have dropped 6 percentage points over that 11-month period. Most of that drop was among those who identified as independent or soft Republican, which Marist defines as registered voters who identify as not strong Republicans or Republican-leaning independents. In other words, in November of this year, there were far more independents and soft Republicans, which includes some independents who said that they viewed Trump favorably. If Republicans soured on Trump and bailed on the party, that might be what you'd expect to see as the pools of independents saw an influx of new anti-Trump independents. So basically, all that can be boiled down to you have these anti-Trump independents that have left the party that are now independents. And so That's why that kind of explains why more independents are not into Trump, and why the Republican Party has shrunk so largely since obtaining the roles of power. So he has chased everyone out. And that also explains why Republicans have such a high favorability of Trump, because he's chased all the anti-Trump Republicans out of the party. Now, there is one thing this analysis from the Washington Post actually does leave out. Now, they point at Trump being the problem for the GOP. If we just got rid of Trump, everything would be fantastic. No, he's actually not the problem. He's actually a symptom of the problem. Whether Trump is there or not, you would still have that 35 to 36% of Republicans, or I should say of the country, that is deeply racist, that is deeply immoral, that hates immigrants, that is misogynistic towards women. That will always exist. That is right now Trump's base. But if Trump were not there, they wouldn't just go away. No, they would just find someone equally as repugnant, or would, I guess in some cases, vote for the lesser of two evils. He is the Republican base put into a position of power. That's what he is. He watches Fox News religiously. We know that. He's incredibly, again, misogynistic, racist, doesn't care about policy, and is a complete buffoon. He knows almost nothing about how to govern. Still. But he doesn't care about it. He is the it of the Republican Party. He's the natural progression, or should I say regression, of conservative political ideology. These 35% of people who still support him will always support him. That's why he could go out there and say, yeah, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and they'd still be with me. He's largely right about that. And the reason that they stick with him is because they are him, and because he's exactly what these voters want to be. Rich, pampered, and somebody who cannot admit to doing anything wrong. He is the Republican Party, not a symptom. We have to treat the disease and not the symptom, which means the disease of course, racism, sexism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and also we have to treat the disease of neoliberalism and actually get back to progressive economic policy. If we do all that, well, then maybe we can actually win. Okay. All right. That's it. I do have one more super chat that I want to share with you guys. This is from F. Drelishak. Don't identify as Republicans. Watch. They're still going to vote Republican. Look at the anti-Trumpers in Congress. Hold your nose and pull the lever. That's basically what I'm saying. Like, yes, these people are still going to be Republican. So, and you're talking about the independents as well that are anti-Trump. And I think that goes back to the abortion issue, because I think you're right. In a lot of respects, they're still one-issue voters. So, and maybe they're publicly saying that, Hamlin, look, I'm not going to identify as a Republican because it's a toxic brand. But make no mistake, I still believe in the tax cuts. And there are two different types of Republicans. And I could go into this for like the next, half hour. But there's a couple different types of Republicans. There's the Wall Street, corporate Republicans, and then there's a Republican base. So you've got the business wing, the Chamber of Commerce Republicans. These are the guys that are like, oh, what are you doing, Trump? You're going to upset the market, right? That's the one thing you cannot do is upset the markets, because that's all we care about. All we care about is money. All we care about is the market, right? And then you have the other Republicans that are basically, and I hate to use this word, but white trash, because they are primarily white, rural, racist, sexist. These are people that believe in, that women shouldn't have bodily autonomy, that there shouldn't be birth control, and that poor people are funny enough, lazy, which again, a lot of these people happen to be on public assistance. But they think of welfare as, of course, no, that's only for black people. So I know I'm probably going to get in trouble with some of that, but that's the way that I see it. And those are the two different camps. And Trump is the camp of number 2. And he's also working over number 1, which again, that's why he's trying to pass this tax cut bill and trying to do everything that the gigantic donors tell him to. So, but again, that 35 to 36%, I think it's mostly from the second type of Republican. Okay. That's all I got. That's a long show. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have Ron Placone on the show as well for the first segment. So that'll be fun. We'll talk about the DNC reforms, whether or not they are good enough, the good, the bad, the ugly on the DNC reforms. So we'll get to that tomorrow. That's it for the show today. Thanks a lot for the donations. Thanks a lot for the support. Please give us a like on your way out. And have an awesome day. With that, love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see y'all tomorrow.